Moonbound chains. Evan Corbin had always ignored the silver mark on her palm, the one her mother had warned her never to reveal. But when the blood moon rose, the mark burned, and the night held its breath. The wind carried her name. The torches flickered with an unseen force. And when she turned, he was already there, golden-eyed, waiting. "You swore yourself to us before you were even born," he murmured. "And now, I've come to claim what's mine." Chapter 1. The Mark of Whispers. The kettle whistled, a shrill, insistent sound that usually soothed Evan, but today, it grated on her nerves. She poured the steaming water over the chamomile tea, the fragrant steam momentarily clouding her small kitchen. The scent, usually a comfort, did little to dispel the unease that had settled over her like a shroud. It was her 58th birthday, a milestone she'd intended to celebrate with quiet contentment, a small cake, and perhaps a glass of wine. But contentment felt miles away. Outside, the wind howled, a mournful cry that echoed the turmoil within her. The old cottage, nestled on the outskirts of the sleepy, almost forgotten town of Havenwood, creaked and groaned under the assault. Havenwood. A misnomer, if ever there was one. Evan thought wryly. It had been her refuge for the last 20 years, a place to escape the wreckage of her past, the ghost of a marriage that had crumbled like ancient parchment, leaving behind only dust and regret. She'd come here seeking solace, a place to rebuild, to find something. She still wasn't quite sure what. She ran a hand through her hair, the silver strands catching the dim light of the single bulb hanging above the kitchen table. More silver every year, she mused, a stark reminder of the passing time, the ticking clock of a life half-lived, or perhaps more than half. The thought brought a familiar pang of melancholy. She'd always felt incomplete, as if a vital piece of her was missing, lost somewhere in the labyrinth of her past. Her gaze fell to her left hand, resting on the worn wooden table. There on her palm, just below her lifeline, was the mark. A silvery crescent moon, no bigger than a dime, etched onto her skin, as if by a ghostly artist. It had been there as long as she could remember, a constant, silent companion. Her mother, a woman of few words and even fewer explanations, had always warned her to keep it hidden. "It's a secret, Evan," she'd said, her voice hushed, her eyes filled with a fear Evan never understood. A secret that must stay buried. Evan had obeyed, instinctively knowing that the mark held a significance she couldn't comprehend. She'd kept it covered, a long-sleeved shirt, a strategically placed bracelet, anything to shield it from prying eyes. It was a part of her, yet separate, a mystery she'd learned to live with, to ignore, like a phantom limb that occasionally throbbed with an unidentifiable ache. Tonight, though, the ache was more than a phantom. The mark felt warm. Not painfully so, but noticeably different. It was a subtle shift, a tingling sensation that spread through her palm, up her arm, settling in the pit of her stomach. She looked at it again, turning her hand this way and that, examining it under the weak light. It seemed brighter. The silver had a faint, ethereal glow, a luminescence she'd never noticed before. A shiver ran down her spine. The wind outside intensified, rattling the windows in their frames. The old oak tree outside her kitchen windows swayed violently, its branches scraping against the glass like skeletal fingers. Evan wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly chilled despite the warmth of the tea in her hands. She glanced at the small, antique clock on the wall. Almost midnight. She should be in bed, asleep, dreaming of what? She couldn't even remember the last time she'd had a pleasant dream. Her nights were usually filled with a restless, unsettling darkness, a void punctuated by fleeting images and whispered words she couldn't quite grasp. The feeling of unease intensified, growing into a palpable dread. Something was different. The air itself felt heavy, charged with an energy she couldn't explain. It was as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something significant, something terrifying. She walked to the window, peering out into the swirling darkness. The moon was hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds, but she knew, somehow, that it was full. A blood moon, the weatherman had said, a rare celestial event. She dismissed it as insignificant, a bit of astronomical trivia. Now, she wasn't so sure. A sudden gust of wind slammed against the cottage, shaking it to its foundations. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the kitchen into darkness. Evan gasped, her heart pounding against her ribs. She fumbled for the matches on the counter, her hands trembling. She struck one, the small flame illuminating her face, her wide, frightened eyes reflecting the flickering light. She lit a candle, the small circle of light doing little to dispel the oppressive darkness. Shadows danced on the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes. The wind howled louder, a primal scream that seemed to pierce her very soul. And then she heard it. A voice. Not a physical sound, but a whisper, carried on the wind, weaving through the storm, calling her name. Evan knew it was a deep, resonant voice, both familiar and foreign, sending a shiver of recognition and fear through her. She moved to the door, drawn by an invisible force, her hand reaching for the knob. She hesitated, her breath catching in her throat. She knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that opening that door would change her life forever. That the world she knew, the quiet, solitary existence she'd carved out for herself, was about to shatter. But she couldn't resist. The pull was too strong, the voice too compelling. The mark on her palm pulsed a warm, insistent throb. She turned the knob, the cold metal biting into her skin. And as she pulled the door open, stepping out into the storm-swept night, she saw him. He stood at the edge of the woods, bathed in the faint, ethereal glow of the hidden moon. Tall, imposing, his silhouette a dark outline against the turbulent sky. His eyes, even from this distance, were unmistakable. They shone with a golden light, a predatory gleam that sent a jolt of primal fear through her. He was waiting. For her. The wind whipped around him, carrying his scent, a wild, earthy fragrance that stirred something deep within her, something ancient and forgotten. A scent of pine needles, wet earth, and wolf. Chapter 2. Blood Moon Rising. The wind tore at Evan's nightgown, plastering the thin fabric to her skin, the cold a sharp contrast to the sudden, almost feverish heat that coursed through her veins. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, a silent, watchful presence at the edge of the woods, his golden eyes burning into hers. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't tear her gaze away. It was the eyes that held her captive. They were unlike anything she'd ever seen, luminous and wild, radiating a power that both terrified and mesmerized her. They seemed to hold the secrets of the forest, the ancient wisdom of the earth, the untamed spirit of the wild. And within their depths, she saw something else, a flicker of recognition, a hint of something achingly familiar. He took a step forward, and Evan instinctively recoiled, her hand flying to the silver mark on her palm, which now throbbed with a fierce, insistent heat. The wind seemed to gather around him, swirling his dark hair, which she now saw reached his shoulders, a wild mane framing a face that was both beautiful and dangerous. He was dressed in dark clothing, clothes that seemed to blend seamlessly with the shadows of the night, making him appear almost ethereal, a creature of the darkness. Another step. He was closer now, close enough for her to see the sharp angles of his cheekbones, the firm line of his jaw, the slight curve of his lips, which were neither smiling nor frowning, but held a curious stillness, a waiting intensity. He smelled of the storm, of the wild, untamed earth, a scent that both repelled and drew her in, a primal, instinctive response she couldn't control. "You swore yourself to us before you were even born," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that resonated deep within her chest, vibrating through her very bones. It was the voice from the wind, the voice that had called her name, the voice that had haunted her dreams. Evan shook her head, trying to clear the fog that had settled over her mind. I don't understand," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper above the howling wind. "I don't know you." A flicker of something, amusement? Pity? Crossed his face, but it was gone so quickly she couldn't be sure. "You will," he said, his voice unwavering, his golden eyes holding hers captive. "The blood moon rises, Evan. The oath cannot be broken. The blood moon." The words echoed in her mind, triggering a long-forgotten memory, a fragment of a conversation overheard as a child, her mother whispering to her father about ancient pacts, about a lineage bound to the moon, about a sacrifice that had been made generations ago. She dismissed it as a childish fantasy, a story told to frighten her into obedience. "But now what oath?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What sacrifice?" He took another step, closing the distance between them. He was so close now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, a warmth that defied the chill of the night. She could see the intricate details of his face, the faint lines around his eyes, the slight stubble on his chin, the intensity of his gaze, which never left hers. "An oath made by your ancestors," he said, his voice a low, hypnotic murmur. "A promise to the ancient ones, to the guardians of the forest, to the wolves." Wolves. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Ivan's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She looked past him, into the dark depths of the woods, her eyes straining to see through the swirling shadows. She'd always felt a strange connection to these woods, a pull that both fascinated and frightened her. She'd often walked among the trees, seeking solace in their silent embrace, feeling a sense of peace she couldn't find anywhere else. But she'd never ventured too deep, always staying within sight of the cottage, always heeding an unspoken warning that echoed in the depths of her soul. "I don't believe in fairy tales," she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. Even as she said the words, she knew they were a lie. She did believe. She'd always believed in the hidden magic of the world, in the whispers of the unseen, in the power of the ancient ones. He smiled then, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver of both fear and something else, something akin to excitement down her spine. "Belief is not required, Evan," he said. "Only obedience." He reached out, his hand hovering just inches from her face. She flinched, but didn't move away. She couldn't. She was frozen, caught between terror and a strange, compelling fascination. His fingers were long and slender, the nails slightly elongated, hinting at something untamed. "The mark," he said, his voice a soft whisper, his gaze dropping to her left hand. "It burns, doesn't it?" Evan nodded, unable to speak. The heat was almost unbearable now, a searing brand on her palm. He gently took her hand, his touch surprisingly gentle, sending a jolt of electricity through her. He turned her palm upwards, his fingers tracing the outline of the silver crescent moon. His touch was both a caress and a claim, a gentle pressure that held a world of unspoken power. "This is the mark of the Moonbound," he said, his voice low and resonant. "The sign of your lineage, your destiny. You are one of us, Evan. You always have been." His words echoed the long-forgotten whispers of her mother, the warnings she'd tried to ignore. "One of us." The words resonated deep within her, stirring something ancient and powerful, something she'd suppressed for so long. But what did it mean? What was she? The clouds above shifted, revealing a sliver of the blood moon, its crimson light bathing the scene in an eerie glow. The wind died down, the forest fell silent, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Evan looked up at the moon, its ominous beauty both terrifying and captivating. And as she gazed at its crimson surface, she saw a reflection of herself, a woman she didn't recognize, a woman with wild eyes and a fierce, untamed spirit. A woman who was no longer afraid. She knew in that instant that her life, the safe, quiet existence she'd known, was gone. Her destiny, written long ago, was written in the blood moon. Chapter 3. Echoes of the Past. The silence that followed the blood moon's brief appearance was profound, broken only by the frantic beating of Ivan's heart. The wind had stilled, the trees stood motionless, and even the air seemed to hold its breath, heavy with unspoken secrets. He still held her hand, his touch a warm, steady pressure against her palm, a connection that felt both terrifying and strangely right.
"Who are you?"
she asked, her voice stronger now, fueled by a nascent defiance that surprised even her. The fear hadn't vanished, but it was tempered by a growing curiosity, a desperate need to understand the forces that were swirling around her, threatening to consume her. He released her hand, but his golden eyes never left hers. "My name is Silas," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate from the depths of the forest itself. "And I am your protector." Protector. The word hung in the air, heavy with implications. Evan searched his face, looking for any sign of deception, any hint of malice. But she saw only a strange blend of intensity and tenderness. It was a look that both unsettled and intrigued her. "Protect her from what?" she asked, her gaze darting towards the dark, silent woods. The fear returned, a cold knot in her stomach. She had always felt a sense of unease about these woods, a feeling that something watchful lurked within their shadows. Silas followed her gaze, his expression unreadable.
"From those who would harm you," he said.
"From those who do not understand the ancient ways, the power of the Moonbound." He spoke in riddles, in cryptic phrases that only deepened the mystery. Yvan's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of information, the long-forgotten memories, the whispers of her mother. The Moonbound, the ancient ways, the wolves. It was all connected, she knew, but the connections were frayed, obscured by time and fear. "My mother," she began, her voice hesitant. "She told me stories." "About a pact, a curse," Silas nodded, his golden eyes softening slightly. "Your mother knew the truth," he said. "But she tried to shield you from it, to protect you from your destiny."
"Destiny?"
Evan scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "I have no destiny. I'm just an old woman, living a quiet life. I don't belong in this fairy tale." "You are more than you know." Silas said, his voice firm, unwavering. "The blood moon has awakened your power, your true self. You cannot deny it any longer." He gestured towards the cottage.
"Come," he said. "We must talk."
"There is much you need to learn." Evan hesitated. She was afraid, yes, but she was also drawn to him. Drawn to his strength, his intensity, his unwavering gaze. Drawn to the mystery that surrounded him, the promise of answers, of understanding. She glanced back at the cottage, at the familiar, safe haven she'd created for herself. But it no longer felt safe. It felt empty. A shell of a life, devoid of meaning, of purpose. She took a deep breath, the cold night air filling her lungs. She looked back at Silas, at his waiting eyes, at the silent promise of the unknown. And she made her choice. She followed him into the cottage, the door closing behind them with a soft click that echoed in the sudden stillness. The candle she'd lit earlier still flickered on the table, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Silas moved with a quiet grace, his presence filling the small space, making it feel both smaller and larger, somehow. He gestured towards the worn armchair by the fireplace.
"Sit," he said.
Evan obeyed, sinking into the familiar cushions, her body tense, her mind racing. Silas remained standing, leaning against the mantelpiece, his golden eyes watching her, studying her. He began to speak, his voice low and soothing, weaving a tale of ancient pacts and forgotten magic, of a lineage of women bound to the moon, gifted with extraordinary powers, tasked with protecting the balance between the human world and the spirit world. He spoke of the wolves, not as the savage beasts of legend, but as guardians, protectors, allies of the Moonbound. He spoke of a curse, a betrayal that had shattered the ancient harmony, a darkness that threatened to consume them all. He spoke of her mother, Alara, a powerful moonbound woman who had fallen in love with a human, Yvan's father, a man who had no knowledge of her true nature. He spoke of the sacrifices Alara had made, the pain she had endured, to protect her daughter from the dangers of her heritage. He spoke of the silver mark, the symbol of the Moonbound, a mark that carried both power and responsibility. As Silas spoke, Memories flooded Evance's mind, fragments of her childhood, long suppressed, now resurfacing with startling clarity. She remembered her mother's strange rituals, her hushed conversations with unseen companions, her sudden disappearances into the woods, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. She remembered the whispers of the villagers, the rumors of a witch living on the outskirts of town, the fear and suspicion that had always surrounded her mother. She remembered the night her mother had died, a sudden, unexplained illness that had taken her swiftly, leaving Evan alone and adrift in a world she didn't understand. She remembered her mother's last words, whispered with a desperate urgency. The mark. Evan, the keep it hidden, protect yourself now. It all made sense. The fear, the secrecy, the warnings. Her mother had been trying to protect her, to shield her from a destiny she wasn't ready to face. But the blood moon had changed everything. It had awakened something within her, something ancient and powerful, something she could no longer ignore. Silas stopped speaking, his gaze fixed on her face. "Do you understand now, Evanna?" he asked. "Do you understand who you are?" Evanna looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear, confusion, and a flicker of excitement. The world she knew had been turned upside down, shattered into a million pieces. But within the chaos, within the fear, there was a glimmer of something else, a sense of belonging, of purpose, of destiny. The quiet of the room pressed in, thick and expectant. The candle flickered, casting one last, long shadow across Silas's face, before guttering out. Chapter 4. The Wolf's Claim. Darkness enveloped the small cottage, a thick, velvety blanket that pressed against Evanna, amplifying the sound of her own ragged breathing. The only light came from the faint, crimson glow of the blood moon filtering through the curtains, casting an eerie, otherworldly ambience over the room. Silas remained a silhouette against the fireplace, a dark, imposing figure whose presence filled the void. I need time," Evanna stammered, her voice barely a whisper. The weight of his words, the revelation of her heritage, the sheer impossibility of it all, pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe.
"This is a lot to take in."
Silas moved, a fluid, graceful motion that belied his size and power. He knelt before her, his golden eyes, now visible in the faint moonlight, locking onto hers. Even in the darkness, their intensity was mesmerizing, a beacon in the shadows. "Time is a luxury we do not have, Evanna," he said, his voice low and urgent. "The blood moon is waning. The veil between worlds is thinning. The others are growing restless." "Others?" Evance's voice trembled. The fear, which had momentarily receded, returned with a vengeance, a cold wave washing over her. Silas nodded. "Those who oppose the ancient ways," he said. "Those who seek to exploit the power of the Moonbound for their own selfish gain. Hunters. And darker things." He reached out, his hand hovering just above hers, not quite touching. She could feel the warmth radiating from his skin, a subtle, magnetic pull. "Your mother protected you for as long as she could," he continued. "But she knew this day would come. She knew you would need guidance. Protection. And you're that protection?" Evan asked, her voice laced with a mixture of skepticism and hope. She wanted to believe him, to trust him, but the ingrained caution of a lifetime, the years of solitude and self-reliance, made it difficult. Silas met her gaze, his expression unwavering. "I am bound to you, Evanna," he said. "By the oath, by the blood moon, by the ancient laws. I am your guardian, your protector, your mate."
Mate.
The word hung in the air, heavy with implications, with a primal resonance that sent a shiver down Evance's spine. It was a word that belonged to the animal kingdom, to the wild, untamed world he represented. It was a word that spoke of a bond far deeper than any human connection, a bond forged in instinct and destiny. Evanna shook her head, trying to deny the truth that was unfolding before her, the reality that was crashing down on her carefully constructed world. "No," she whispered. "That's impossible." He gently took her hand, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through her. His fingers were warm and strong, encircling hers with a possessive tenderness that both frightened and thrilled her. The mark on her palm throbbed, a fiery pulse that echoed the rhythm of her heart. "It is not impossible, he said, his voice a soft, hypnotic murmur. "It is our destiny. We are moonbound, you and I, linked by the ancient magic, by the power of the moon. We are meant to be together." He raised her hand to his lips, his breath warm against her skin. He pressed a gentle kiss to the silver crescent moon on her palm, a gesture that was both reverent and possessive. The touch sent a wave of heat through her, a searing sensation that ignited a fire deep within her, a fire she hadn't known existed. Evan gasped, her body trembling. She tried to pull her hand away, but his grip tightened, not painfully, but firmly, possessively. She looked into his eyes, into the golden depths that held both a wildness and a tenderness that captivated her. She saw a reflection of herself, a woman she was only beginning to understand, a woman who was both terrified and exhilarated. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You don't have to do anything, he said, his voice soothing, reassuring. "Just accept. Accept who you are.
Accept me. Accept."
The word echoed in her mind, a simple word with profound implications. Accept her heritage, her power, her destiny. Accept him. A werewolf. A creature of myth and legend. Her mate. She looked at him, at his strong, handsome face, at his golden eyes that held a universe of unspoken emotions. She felt a pull towards him, a primal, instinctive connection that defied logic, that transcended fear. It was a feeling of belonging, of coming home. He leaned closer, his face inches from hers. She could feel his breath on her skin, smell the wild, earthy scent of him, a scent that both calmed and excited her. He lowered his head, his lips brushing against hers, a feather-light touch that sent a shockwave through her entire body. It was a tentative kiss, a question, a promise. It was a kiss that tasted of moonlight and magic, of wildness and tenderness, of fear and desire. It was a kiss that shattered the last vestiges of her resistance, that opened the door to a world she had never imagined, a world of ancient magic and forbidden love. Evan closed her eyes, surrendering to the moment, to the overwhelming sensations that coursed through her. She returned the kiss, her lips tentatively meeting his, a hesitant exploration of the unknown. And as their lips met, as their bodies touched, she felt a connection, a spark, a recognition. It was a feeling of completion, as though the missing piece of her soul had finally been found. The kiss lingered, deepening, becoming more urgent, more passionate. The world outside faded away, the darkness receded, and there was only him, only the feel of his lips on hers, the warmth of his body, the beat of his heart against hers. When they broke apart, they were caught in the same spell. The blood moon's light still seemed too bright in the windows. Evan placed her hand on his cheek and stared into his golden eyes, asking a silent question. Chapter 5. A Glimmer of Truth. The question hung in the air, unspoken but palpable, a shimmering thread of uncertainty and nascent hope woven between them. Silas's golden eyes, usually so intense and unwavering, softened, reflecting a vulnerability that Evan hadn't seen before. He gently cupped her hand, his thumb tracing the delicate lines of her palm, lingering over the still glowing crescent moon. "I know this is overwhelming," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. "But I promise you, Evan, I will not force you into anything. This bond, it requires consent, a willing heart on both sides." His words, so unexpected, so contrary to the image of the powerful, almost predatory creature he had initially presented, eased some of the tension that had coiled within her. The fear hadn't vanished entirely, but it was now mingled with a growing curiosity, a flicker of trust that his touch, his kiss, had ignited. "Tell me," she said, her voice stronger now, fueled by a desperate need to understand.
"Tell me everything."
"About the Moonbound, about the wolves, about us." Silas nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. He moved to sit beside her on the worn armchair, their bodies close, his arm brushing against hers, sending a comforting warmth through her. He began to speak, his voice a low, hypnotic murmur, weaving a tale that was both fantastical and strangely believable. He spoke of the origins of the Moonbound, of a time long ago when humans and the spirit world were intertwined, when magic flowed freely through the land. He spoke of a group of women, blessed by the moon goddess Selene, gifted with extraordinary abilities, the power to heal, to communicate with animals, to control the elements, to shift their form. These women, the first Moonbound, were tasked with maintaining the balance between the worlds, protecting the sacred groves, guarding the ancient secrets. He spoke of the wolves, not as the savage beasts of folklore, but as the chosen companions of the Moonbound, their protectors, their allies, their soulmates. He explained that the bond between a Moonbound woman and her wolf was unlike any other, a connection that transcended the physical, a merging of souls, a union of hearts and minds. It was a bond forged in destiny, strengthened by love, and sealed by the blood moon. He spoke of the curse, a betrayal that had shattered the ancient harmony, a rift that had separated the Moonbound from their wolves, weakening their powers, driving them into hiding. He spoke of a jealous sorceress, scorned by a Moonbound woman, who had cursed their lineage, binding them to the moon's cycle, forcing them to live in fear, hunted by those who sought to exploit their power. He spoke of his own pack, the Shadowclaw, descendants of the original wolves who had sworn allegiance to the Moonbound. He spoke of their struggles, their losses, their unwavering loyalty to the ancient ways. He spoke of his own longing, his yearning for the connection, the bond, that had been denied to him for so long. And then he spoke of her. He spoke of Alara, her mother, a powerful Moonbound woman who had defied the curse, who had fallen in love with a human, who had sacrificed everything to protect her daughter from the dangers of her heritage. He spoke of Avant's own unique gifts, her latent powers, her connection to the earth, her ability to heal, her potential. As Silas spoke, Evan felt a shift within her, a gradual awakening of something deep and primal. The memories, long suppressed, resurfaced with startling clarity. She remembered her mother's gentle touch, her healing hands that could soothe any pain. She remembered the whispers of the wind, the rustling of the leaves, the silent communication she'd always felt with the natural world. She remembered the dreams, vivid and strange, of running through the forest, of shifting forms, of soaring through the night sky. She looked at her hands, at the silver mark on her palm, no longer a strange, foreign object, but a symbol of her heritage, her power, her connection to something ancient and magical. She looked at Silas, at his golden eyes that held both a wildness and a tenderness, at his strong, handsome face that reflected both strength and vulnerability. And she began to understand. "So, I'm a werewolf?" she asked, the words still sounding strange, foreign on her tongue. Silas smiled, a slow, gentle smile that transformed his features, making him appear even more captivating. "Not exactly," he said. "You are Moonbound. You have the potential to shift, to take the form of a wolf, but it is a choice, a learned skill, a transformation that requires guidance." He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the curve of her jaw, sending a shiver of pleasure through her. "I can teach you," he said, his voice a soft whisper. "I can help you unlock your potential, your true self. I can show you the way." His words were a promise, an invitation, a temptation. Evan felt a pull towards him, a yearning for the unknown, for the magic, for the connection he offered. But fear still lingered, a shadow in the corners of her mind. "What about the hunters?" she asked. "The darker things you mentioned?" Silas's expression hardened, his golden eyes flickering with a predatory gleam. "They are a threat," he said. "But we are stronger together. The Moonbound and the Shadowclaw, united, can face any danger." He took her hand again, his grip firm, reassuring. "I will protect you, Evan, he said, his voice unwavering. "I swear it. I will never let anyone harm you." His words, his touch, his gaze, all conveyed a sincerity that was impossible to deny. Evan felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of fear, excitement, and hope. She looked into his eyes, into the golden depths that held a universe of unspoken promises. And she knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that she was no longer alone. She nodded slowly. "Tell me more," she said. Her voice was a bare whisper that seemed lost to the room. But Silas heard, and the slight upturn of his lips was all the answer she needed. Chapter 6. The Forbidden Path. The night deepened, the blood moon slowly fading, its crimson glow replaced by the soft, silvery light of the waning moon. Silas continued to speak, his voice a soothing balm to Evan's frayed nerves, his words painting a vivid picture of a world she had only glimpsed in dreams. He spoke of the joys of shifting, of the freedom of running through the forest under the moonlight, of the heightened senses, the primal connection to the earth. He explained the intricacies of the pack hierarchy, the importance of loyalty, the strength found in unity. He described the rituals, the ceremonies, the ancient traditions that bound the Shadow Claw together, that connected them to the spirit world, to the moon goddess Selene. He also spoke of the dangers, the challenges, the constant threat posed by the hunters, those who sought to eradicate the werewolves, to steal their power, to destroy their way of life. He described a particular group, the Argentum, a secret society of hunters, descendants of the sorceress who had cursed the Moonbound, dedicated to their destruction. They were ruthless, relentless, and possessed ancient knowledge, weapons, and rituals designed to target werewolves and Moonbound alike. Evan listened intently, her mind absorbing the information, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fascination. The world he described was both terrifying and exhilarating, a world of magic and danger, of ancient secrets and forbidden love. A world she was now a part of, whether she liked it or not. "But why me?" she asked, interrupting his narrative.
Why now?
"I've lived for 58 years without knowing any of this. Why did the blood moon awaken my powers?" Silas's expression softened, his golden eyes filled with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "The blood moon is a catalyst," he explained. "It amplifies the magic, strengthens the bonds, awakens the dormant potential. It is a time of great power, but also of great vulnerability." He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the curve of her jaw. "You are a descendant of a powerful line of moonbound women, Evan, he said. "Your mother was one of the strongest, the most gifted. She shielded you from your heritage, but she couldn't suppress it entirely. The blood moon it called to you, awakened the magic within you. It was inevitable. Inevitable." The word echoed in her mind, confirming what she had already begun to suspect. Her life, her destiny, had been predetermined, written in the stars, in the blood moon, in the ancient pacts of her ancestors. "But I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, her voice filled with doubt. "I'm not strong like my mother. I'm not a warrior." Silas smiled, a gentle, reassuring smile that eased some of her fears. "You are stronger than you think, Evan," he said. "You have the blood of the Moonbound flowing through your veins. You have the power within you. You just need to embrace it." He stood up, his movements fluid and graceful. He walked to the window, looking out at the moonlit forest. "Come," he said, his voice a soft invitation. "Let me show you." Evan hesitated. She was still afraid, still uncertain, but she couldn't deny the pull she felt towards him, towards the magic, towards the unknown. She rose from the armchair, her legs trembling slightly, and followed him to the window. The forest looked different now, bathed in the soft, silvery moonlight. It no longer seemed menacing, threatening, but inviting. She could hear the whispers of the wind, the rustling of the leaves, the calls of the night creatures. She could feel the energy of the earth, the pulse of life flowing through the trees, through the soil, through her. Silas turned to her, his golden eyes glowing in the darkness. He reached out and took her hand, his touch sending a familiar jolt of electricity through her. "Close your eyes," he said.
Breathe.
"Feel the energy of the moon, of the earth, of me." Evelyn closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, the cold night air filling her lungs. She focused on the feel of Silas's hand in hers, on the warmth of his body, on the steady beat of his heart. She focused on the sounds of the forest, on the whispers of the wind, on the energy that flowed around her, within her. Slowly, gradually, she began to feel a shift, a tingling sensation that spread through her body, starting in her toes and rising up to the top of her head. She felt a warmth, a power, a connection to something ancient and primal. She felt alive. Now, Silas whispered, his voice close to her ear.
Imagine.
Imagine yourself running through the forest, free, unburdened. Imagine yourself shifting, transforming, becoming one with the night. Evelyn opened her eyes, her gaze fixed on the moonlit forest. She imagined herself running, leaping, soaring through the trees. She imagined her body changing, transforming, becoming sleek and powerful, covered in fur, her senses heightened, her instincts sharpened. She imagined herself a wolf. And then she felt it. A jolt, a surge of energy, a wave of heat that washed over her. She gasped, her body trembling, her bones aching. She looked down at her hands, expecting to see fur, claws, but they remained unchanged. Silas smiled, his eyes filled with encouragement. It takes practice, Evelyn, he said. But you felt it, didn't you? The potential, the power. Evelyn nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear. She had felt it, a glimpse of the magic, a hint of the transformation that was possible. It was a terrifying, exhilarating feeling, a feeling that she knew she would never forget. As they stood at the window, she could hear a distinct howl in the distance, and Silas's smile grew. Chapter 7. Shadows of Doubt. The distant howl, mournful and yet strangely exhilarating, resonated deep within Evelyn, stirring something primal, a forgotten instinct that hummed beneath her skin. Silas's smile, reflecting a knowing satisfaction, sent a shiver of both anticipation and unease through her. "That's your pack?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, her gaze drawn to the dark expanse of the woods. Silas nodded, his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. "They are waiting," he said. "For you." For her. The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Yvan's mind raced, trying to reconcile the life she had known, the quiet, solitary existence she had carved out for herself, with the fantastical reality that was unfolding before her. She was a moonbound, a potential shapeshifter, a member of a hidden world she had only glimpsed in dreams. And now, a pack of werewolves was waiting for her. The initial rush of excitement, the thrill of feeling the nascent magic within her, began to fade, replaced by a wave of doubt, of fear. She was 58 years old, a woman set in her ways, comfortable in her solitude, her routines. Could she really embrace this new life, this wild, untamed world that Silas represented? She looked at him, at his strong, handsome face, at his golden eyes that held both a wildness and a tenderness. She felt a pull towards him, an undeniable attraction, a connection that defied logic. But she also saw the shadows, the hints of danger, the unspoken responsibilities that came with being moonbound, with being his mate. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm not sure I can change. I'm not brave enough." Silas's expression softened, his hand reaching out to gently cup her cheek. His touch was warm, reassuring, sending a wave of comfort through her. "You don't have to be brave, Evelyn," he said, his voice a low, soothing murmur. "You just have to be yourself. The strength is already within you. The courage will come." He leaned closer, his lips brushing against her ear, his breath warm on her skin. "I will be there," he whispered. "Every step of the way. I will guide you, protect you, help you find your way." His words, his touch, his presence, were a lifeline, a beacon in the storm of her doubts. She wanted to believe him, to trust him, to surrender to the unknown. But the ingrained caution of a lifetime, the years of self-reliance, the fear of vulnerability, held her back. What if I fail? She asked, her voice barely audible. What if I can't shift? What if I disappoint you? The pack. Silas's grip on her cheek tightened slightly, not painfully, but firmly, possessively. You will not fail, Eventha, he said, his voice unwavering. I have seen your potential, your power. I have felt your connection to the moon, to the earth, to me. You are stronger than you know. He paused, his gaze searching hers, his eyes filled with a depth of emotion that took her breath away. And you will not disappoint me, he continued, his voice softer now, laced with a tenderness that melted her heart. I am bound to you, Eventha, not just by the oath, but by something more. Something deeper. Something deeper. The words resonated within her, echoing the feelings she had been trying to suppress, the undeniable attraction, the primal connection, the sense of belonging. She looked into his eyes, into the golden depths that held a universe of unspoken emotions. And she saw love. It was a love that was both terrifying and exhilarating, a love that challenged everything she thought she knew about herself, about the world. It was a love that promised both danger and fulfillment, both fear and joy. It was a love that she wasn't sure she was ready for, but couldn't deny. She began. Her voice choked with emotion, but she couldn't find the words. She didn't know what to say, what to do. She was torn between her fear and her desire, between her old life and her new destiny. Silas seemed to understand her struggle, her unspoken turmoil. He didn't push her, didn't pressure her. He simply held her gaze, his eyes filled with patience, with understanding, with love. Take your time, Eventha, he said, his voice a gentle whisper. There is no rush. I will wait, for as long as it takes. His words, so simple, yet so profound, eased the knot of tension in her chest. She took a deep breath, the cold night air filling her lungs, grounding her, calming her. She looked out at the moonlit forest, at the silent trees, at the hidden paths that beckoned her. She felt the pull of the magic, the call of her destiny, the promise of the unknown. And she knew, with a certainty that surprised even herself, that she couldn't go back. She couldn't return to her old life, to her quiet, solitary existence. She had tasted the magic, felt the power, glimpsed the possibilities. She had found something she had been searching for her entire life, without even knowing it. She turned back to Silas, her eyes meeting his, a flicker of determination, of acceptance, replacing the fear. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. Show me, she said, her voice still soft, but firmer now. Show me the way. As Silas released a breath, Eventha heard another howl, this one closer. And although she knew she should be terrified, her heart picked up in anticipation, not fear. Chapter 8. The Ancient Covenant. Silas's smile widened, a genuine, heart-stopping expression of relief and anticipation that sent a warmth spreading through Evantha's chest. He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, a gesture of connection, of unity, that felt both comforting and exhilarating. We'll go slowly, he reassured her, his voice a low murmur that vibrated through her. There's much to learn, much to experience. But we'll do it together. He led her away from the window, back towards the center of the small cottage. The single candle he'd lit earlier had long since burned out, leaving the room bathed in the soft, silvery glow of the moon filtering through the curtains. The air felt charged with anticipation, with the unspoken energy that flowed between them. Before we go to the pack, Silas said, his gaze holding hers, there's something you need to understand. Something about the history of the Moonbound, about the covenant that binds us. He gestured towards the old, wooden chest that sat in the corner of the room, a relic from Evantha's mother, filled with forgotten memories, with secrets she was only now beginning to uncover. Your mother kept many things hidden, Silas said, his voice tinged with a hint of sadness. For your protection. But some things need to be revealed. He walked towards the chest, his movements fluid and graceful, his presence filling the small space, making it feel both smaller and larger, somehow. He knelt before it, his fingers tracing the intricate carvings on its surface, his touch both reverent and hesitant. Evan watched him, her heart pounding with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. She had always known that her mother had kept secrets, that there was a hidden world she had only glimpsed on the periphery of her life. But she had never dared to delve too deep, to uncover the truth that lay buried beneath the surface. Silas opened the chest, the hinges creaking in protest, releasing a musty scent of old paper, dried herbs, and something else, something wild and untamed, that sent a shiver down Evan's spine. He reached inside, his hand disappearing into the darkness, and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. The book was ancient, its pages yellowed and brittle, its cover worn and cracked. The title, barely legible, was written in a language Evan didn't recognize, a script that seemed both familiar and foreign. "This," Silas said, his voice hushed, reverent, "is the Book of Selene. It contains the history of the Moonbound, the ancient laws, the rituals, the secrets." He handed the book to Evan, his fingers brushing against hers, sending a familiar jolt of electricity through her. She took it carefully, her hands trembling slightly, feeling the weight of its history, its power, its significance. "The covenant," Silas said, his gaze fixed on her face, "is the agreement between the Moonbound and the wolves. It was forged centuries ago, a pact of mutual protection, of loyalty, of love." He explained that the Moonbound, gifted with their extraordinary powers, were vulnerable to those who sought to exploit them, to control them. The wolves, with their strength, their speed, their heightened senses, offered protection, companionship, a bond that strengthened both species. He spoke of the original covenant, a sacred oath sworn under the full moon, a promise of eternal allegiance, a merging of souls, a union of hearts and minds. He spoke of the rituals, the ceremonies, the traditions that had been passed down through generations, that bound the Moonbound and the wolves together. He spoke of the betrayal, the curse that had shattered the ancient harmony, that had separated the Moonbound from their wolves, weakening their powers, driving them into hiding. He spoke of the sorceress, Lyra, who had cursed their lineage, driven by jealousy and a thirst for power. As Silas spoke, Evan opened the book, her fingers tracing the strange, beautiful script, her eyes drawn to the intricate illustrations that adorned the pages. She saw images of women, strong and beautiful, with flowing hair and piercing eyes, surrounded by wolves, their loyal companions. She saw images of the moon, in all its phases, casting its silvery light upon the earth. She saw images of rituals, ceremonies, ancient symbols that resonated deep within her, stirring something forgotten, something primal. She came to a page that was marked with a silver crescent moon, identical to the one on her palm. Beneath the illustration was a passage written in English, a translation of the ancient text. "The Moonbound and the wolf," she read aloud, her voice trembling slightly, "shall be as one. Their hearts shall beat in unison, their souls shall intertwine, their destinies shall be forever linked. By the power of the moon, by the oath of the blood, by the love that binds them, they shall be inseparable." Inseparable. The word echoed in her mind, confirming what she had already begun to feel, the undeniable connection, the primal bond, the love that was growing between her and Silas. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of awe, understanding, and acceptance. The fear had not vanished entirely, but it was now tempered by a growing sense of purpose, of belonging, of destiny. Silas met her gaze, his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight, his expression filled with a tenderness that took her breath away. "You are part of this. Evan," he said, his voice a soft whisper. "You are the key. The blood moon has awakened your power, your connection to the ancient ways. You are the one who can heal the rift, restore the balance, break the curse." His words were a challenge, a responsibility, a hope. Evan felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of fear, excitement, and determination. She was no longer just an old woman, living a quiet life. She was moonbound, a protector, a lover. And, Taking one final look at the book in her hands, she was ready. Chapter 9. Whispers of Rebellion. The weight of Silas's words, the magnitude of the task he had laid before her heal the rift, restore the balance, break the curse settled heavily on Avant's shoulders. She closed the Book of Selene, its ancient leather cool against her trembling hands. The cottage, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, its walls closing in on her, suffocating her with the enormity of her newfound destiny. "I don't know if I can do this, Silas," she whispered, her voice filled with doubt, her gaze dropping to the floor, unable to meet his intense, expectant stare. "I'm not special. I'm not a hero." Silas moved towards her, his step silent on the worn wooden floorboards. He knelt before her, his golden eyes, now softened with compassion, locking onto hers. He gently took her hands, his touch warm and reassuring, sending a familiar current of energy through her. "You are special, Evan," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. "You are moonbound. You carry the blood of the ancient ones, the power of the moon, the spirit of the wolf. You are chosen. Chosen." The word echoed in her mind, a double-edged sword. It implied a purpose, a destiny, but also a burden, a responsibility she wasn't sure she was ready to bear. "But Lyra's curse," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's been centuries. How can I, a single woman, possibly break something so ancient, so powerful?" Silas's grip on her hands tightened slightly, not painfully, but firmly, reassuringly. "The curse is strong," he admitted, his expression grave. "But it is not unbreakable. Lyra's power was fueled by hatred, by jealousy, by darkness. Your power is fueled by love, by compassion, by light." He pointed to the silver crescent moon on her palm, its faint glow a constant reminder of her connection to the magic, to the moon, to him. "The blood moon awakened your potential," he said. "It strengthened the bond between us, between the moonbound and the wolves. It is a sign of hope." Hope. The word, so fragile, yet so powerful, flickered within her, a tiny flame in the darkness of her doubts. She looked into Silas's eyes, into the golden depths that held a universe of unspoken emotions. She saw his belief in her, his unwavering faith, his love. And it gave her strength. "But how?" she asked, her voice stronger now, fueled by a nascent determination. "What do I need to do?" Silas smiled, a gentle, encouraging smile that eased some of the tension that had coiled within her. "The Book of Selene holds the answers," he said. "But the knowledge, it must be earned. It must be understood. It must be lived." He stood up, pulling her gently to her feet. Their bodies were close, his arm brushing against hers, sending a wave of warmth through her. He led her towards the door, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, a gesture of guidance, of protection, of possession. "We'll go to the pack," he said, his voice low and resonant. "They will help you. They will teach you. They will welcome you." Welcome her. The thought sent a shiver of both anticipation and apprehension through her. She was about to enter a world she had only glimpsed in dreams, a world of werewolves, of ancient magic, of hidden dangers. She was about to meet a pack of strangers, who were also her family. As they stepped outside, into the cool night air, Evan felt a shift within her, a subtle transformation. The fear hadn't vanished entirely, but it was now mingled with a growing sense of excitement, of adventure, of purpose. She was no longer just Evan the Corbin, the solitary widow, living a quiet life. She was moonbound, a woman with a destiny, a woman in love. The forest, bathed in the soft, silvery moonlight, seemed to beckon her, inviting her to explore its hidden paths, to uncover its ancient secrets, to embrace her true self. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of pine needles, wet earth, and wolf. Silas took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, a gesture of connection, of unity, that felt both comforting and exhilarating. They began to walk, their steps in sync, their bodies close, their hearts beating in unison. As they walked, Silas spoke of the pack, of their traditions, their rituals, their loyalty to each other, to the Moonbound. He spoke of their leader, Alpha Marius, a wise and powerful wolf who had guided the Shadowclaw for decades. He spoke of the other members of the pack, each with their own unique personalities, their own strengths, their own stories. He did not say that there was unrest. He didn't say that some of the wolves didn't believe a human, even one Moonbound, should be welcomed. He omitted the whispers of rebellion. Evan sensed a shift in his demeanor, a subtle tension that betrayed his outward calm. She could feel it in the way he held her hand, in the way he scanned the forest, in the way his golden eyes, usually so warm and open, now flickered with a hint of vigilance. But she was too caught up in the magic of the moment, too drawn into this new reality. The forest was calling to her. Chapter 10. The Heart's Betrayal. The path through the forest was winding and uneven, the moonlight filtering through the dense canopy, casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on Avant's eyes. The air was cool and crisp, filled with the scent of pine needles, damp earth, and the wild, musky aroma of wolf, a scent that both heightened her senses and stirred a primal unease within her. Silas walked beside her, his hand firmly clasped in hers, his presence a constant reassurance, a grounding force in this strange, new world. He continued to speak, his voice low and soothing, filling the silence with tales of the pack, of their history, their traditions, their challenges. He spoke of their hunts, their rituals, their connection to the land, to the moon, to each other. He spoke of the importance of loyalty, of trust, of unity, the core values that bound the Shadowclaw together. But beneath the surface of his words, Evan sensed a current of tension, an unspoken anxiety that he tried to conceal. She noticed the way his gaze constantly scanned the forest, the way his muscles tensed at every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig. She felt the subtle pressure of his hand in hers, a protective grip that betrayed his underlying concern. She wanted to ask him, to question him about the source of his unease, but she hesitated. She didn't want to appear weak, fearful, to betray the trust he had placed in her. She wanted to be strong, to be worthy of his love, of his protection, of her newfound destiny. As they walked deeper into the forest, the trees grew taller, thicker, the moonlight fading, the darkness deepening. The sounds of the night intensified, the hooting of owls, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. Evan felt a shiver run down her spine, a primal fear that tightened her chest, made it hard to breathe. Suddenly, Silas stopped, his body tensing, his golden eyes narrowing, focusing on a point ahead of them. He raised his free hand, signaling her to be silent. Evan held her breath, her heart pounding against her ribs, her senses on high alert. She heard it then, a low growl, coming from the shadows just beyond the reach of the moonlight. It was a menacing sound, filled with hostility, with threat. Her hand instinctively flew to the silver mark on her palm, which now throbbed with a dull, persistent heat. Silas stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body, his muscles coiled, ready to spring. He let out a low growl of his own, a warning, a challenge. From the shadows, 3 figures emerged, their forms slowly taking shape as they stepped into the faint moonlight. They were wolves, large and imposing, their fur dark and sleek, their eyes glowing with a predatory gleam. But they were not like the wolves of legend, the savage beasts of folklore. They were different. They were intelligent, aware, their eyes reflecting a sentience, a consciousness that was both terrifying and captivating. Evan recognized one of them, a large, muscular wolf with a distinctive scar above his left eye. It was the wolf she had seen in her dreams, the one that had haunted her nightmares, the one that had always felt familiar. Silas, one of the wolves, spoke, his voice a deep, guttural growl that resonated through the night. But it was a human voice, emanating from a wolf's throat. Evan gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. Silas's grip on her hand tightened, his body tensing further. "Kale," he said, his voice low and wary, acknowledging the speaker. "What is the meaning of this?" Kale, the scarred wolf, stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Evan, his eyes filled with a mixture of hostility and curiosity. "We heard the rumors," he growled, "that you had brought a human into our territory, that you had claimed her. Claimed her." The words, spoken with such disdain, such possessiveness, sent a shiver down Evan's spine. She felt a surge of anger, of defiance, rising within her. She was not a possession, a prize to be claimed.
She was moonbound.
A woman with her own will, her own power, her own destiny. But before she could speak, Silas responded, his voice firm, unwavering.
"Evan is moonbound," he said.
"She is under my protection. She is my mate." His words, spoken with such conviction, such possessiveness, sent a different kind of shiver through Evan, a shiver of both fear and excitement. The concept of mate was still alien to her, yet undeniable. The other two wolves, flanking Kale, growled in response, their eyes burning with suspicion, with resentment. Evan could sense their hostility, their disapproval, their rebellion. Silas had not been entirely truthful. There was dissension in the pack. "A human?" One of the wolves snarled, his voice dripping with contempt. "Mate to a shadowclaw? That is forbidden. Against the ancient laws." "The laws are not absolute, Rorik," Silas said, his voice calm but firm. "They can be adapted. To changing times. To new realities." "The blood moon does not change everything, Silas," the third wolf interrupted, a sleek female with intelligent eyes. "She is not one of us. She is a danger. A liability." Her words, delivered with a cold, calculating precision, were like a dagger to Evan's heart, betraying not only the pack's distrust, but a deeper, more personal animosity. A heart's betrayal. Chapter 11. Scars of the Soul. The female wolf's words, sharp and cold as shards of ice, pierced Evan's fragile composure, shattering the nascent confidence she had begun to build. The betrayal stung, not just of the pack's rejection, but of the implied intimacy, the hinted at past connection between Silas and this she-wolf. "Lyra," Silas said, his voice low and warning, his golden eyes flickering with a mixture of frustration and regret. The name, the same as the ancient sorceress who had cursed the Moonbound, struck Evan with a chilling resonance. It was a name that carried the weight of history, of betrayal, of pain. Lyra, the she-wolf, ignored Silas's warning, her gaze fixed on Evan, her eyes narrowed with a predatory intensity. "You may have charmed Silas with your human wiles," she growled, her voice dripping with venom. "But you will never be one of us. You will never understand our ways, our loyalty, our bond."
Bond.
The word, spoken with such possessiveness, such emphasis, revealed the depth of Lyra's resentment, the source of her hostility. It was not just about the ancient laws, about the pack's traditions. It was about Silas. It was about a love lost, a connection broken, a heart betrayed. Evan felt a pang of sympathy for Lyra, a flicker of understanding amidst the fear and anger that surged within her. She knew what it was like to lose love, to feel the pain of rejection, the emptiness of a broken heart. But she also knew that she was not to blame for Lyra's pain, that she had not intentionally sought to steal Silas's affections, that their connection, their bond, was something fated, inevitable. "I did not seek this," Evan said, her voice trembling slightly, but firm, her gaze meeting Lyra's hostile stare. "I did not ask for this. But I will not apologize for who I am."
"For what I am."
Her words, spoken with a newfound defiance, a nascent strength that surprised even herself, seemed to momentarily silence the wolves. The tension in the air was palpable, a thick, suffocating blanket of unspoken emotions. Silas stepped forward, placing himself between Evan and the other wolves, his body a shield, his presence a reassurance. "Enough," he said, his voice commanding, his golden eyes flashing with authority. "Lyra, Kale, Rorik. This is not the time, nor the place. Evan is under my protection. She is moonbound. She is my mate. You will respect her." His words, spoken with such conviction, such finality, seemed to quell the immediate threat, but the underlying tension remained. The wolves, though momentarily subdued, still radiated hostility, distrust, resentment. Kale, the scarred wolf, stepped forward, his gaze shifting from Evan to Silas, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. "You have made your choice, Silas," he growled. "But do not expect us to blindly follow. Do not expect us to accept her." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows, his two companions following close behind. Lyra lingered for a moment, her gaze fixed on Silas, her eyes filled with a pain that mirrored Avant's own. Then, without a word, she turned and vanished into the darkness, leaving Evan and Silas alone in the moonlit clearing. The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive, filled with unspoken emotions. Evan felt drained, exhausted, her body trembling with the aftermath of the confrontation. The scars of the encounter, both physical and emotional, ran deep. Silas turned to her, his golden eyes filled with concern, with regret, with love. He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the curve of her jaw, sending a wave of warmth through her chilled skin. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice a low, husky murmur. "I should have prepared you. I should have told you." Told her what? About Lyra? About the pack's resistance? About the challenges, the dangers, the sacrifices that lay ahead? Evan didn't know, and she didn't care. She was tired of secrets, of half-truths, of unspoken fears. "Tell me now," she said, her voice firm, unwavering, her gaze meeting his. "Tell me everything. About Lyra, about the pack, about us." Silas hesitated, his eyes flickering with a mixture of reluctance and resignation. He knew that he could no longer shield her, that she deserved the truth, the whole truth, no matter how painful, how difficult. He began to speak, his voice low and heavy, revealing the scars of his own soul, the wounds that had never fully healed. He spoke of his past, of his bond with Lyra, of their shared history, their dreams, their love. He spoke of the curse, of the challenges it had presented, of the sacrifices they had made, of the pain they had endured. He spoke of the night Lyra had been injured, a hunt gone wrong, a hunter's trap that had nearly cost her life. He spoke of his guilt, his grief, his feeling of responsibility for her pain. He spoke of the way their bond had fractured, the way their connection had weakened, the way their love had faded. He spoke of his loneliness, his yearning for a connection, a bond that he thought he would never find again. And then he spoke of her. He spoke of the blood moon, of the moment he had seen her, of the instant recognition, the undeniable pull, the love that had blossomed within him, unexpected, unwanted, yet undeniable. As Silas spoke, Evan listened, her heart aching for him, for Lyra, for the pain they had both endured. She understood now, the source of Lyra's hostility, the depth of her resentment, the betrayal she felt. The scars of their past now felt like open wounds. Chapter 12. A Dance with Darkness. The moon hung low in the sky, a pale, watchful eye peering through the branches of the ancient trees, casting long, skeletal shadows that danced around Evan and Silas. The air was thick with unspoken emotions, with the weight of Silas's confession, with the echoes of Lyra's pain, with the looming uncertainty of their future. Evan reached out and gently touched Silas's arm, her fingers tracing the outline of his muscles, feeling the tension that still rippled beneath his skin. Her touch was a gesture of comfort, of understanding, of acceptance. "It's all right, Silas," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You don't have to explain. I understand. Lyra, she loves you. And you cared for her. That's natural." Silas looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and relief. He covered her hand with his fingers intertwining with hers, a silent acknowledgement of their connection, their bond, their love. It was more than just caring. "Evan," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. "Lyra and I, we were bonded, mated, for many years. We thought we believed it was forever. Forever. The word hung in the air, a poignant reminder of the fragility of love, of the impermanence of all things. Evan felt a pang of sadness, not just for Silas and Lyra, but for herself, for the uncertainty of her own future, for the challenges that lay ahead. But the blood moon, she said, her voice hesitant, questioning. It changed everything, didn't it? It awakened something within me. Within you. Within us. Silas nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. The blood moon is a catalyst, he said. It amplifies the magic, strengthens the bonds, awakens the dormant potential. It reveals the truth. The truth. The word resonated deep within Evan, a reminder of her own journey, of her own awakening, of her own transformation. She had come to Havenwood seeking solace, a place to escape her past, to rebuild her life. But she had found something more, something she had never expected, something magical. But what about Lyra? She asked, her voice filled with concern. What about the pack? They don't accept me. They resent me. Silas's expression hardened, his golden eyes flickering with a protective intensity. They will learn to accept you. Evan, he said, his voice firm, unwavering. They will see your strength, your courage, your worth. They will understand that you are my mate, that you are moonbound. His words, spoken with such conviction, such possessiveness, sent a shiver of both excitement and apprehension through her. She knew that the path ahead would not be easy, that there would be challenges, obstacles, dangers. But she also knew that she was not alone, that she had Silas by her side, that together they could face anything. Suddenly, a twig snapped nearby, breaking the silence, shattering the fragile peace. Silas's body tensed, his senses on high alert, his golden eyes scanning the surrounding darkness. He stepped in front of Evan, shielding her with his body, his muscles coiled, ready to spring. Show yourself, he commanded, his voice a low growl that resonated through the night. From the shadows, a figure emerged, slowly taking shape as it stepped into the faint moonlight. It was a man, tall and imposing, dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by the shadows of his hood. But Evan recognized the scent, the subtle aroma of something metallic, something dangerous. Hunters, Silas whispered, his voice barely audible, his hand tightening on hers. The man stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate, his eyes fixed on Evan, his expression unreadable. He held something in his hand, a small, silver object that glinted in the moonlight. Moonbound, the man said, his voice cold and emotionless, his words dripping with disdain. We have been waiting for you. Waiting for her. The words sent a chill down Avant's spine, a primal fear that tightened her chest, made it hard to breathe. She knew, instinctively, that this was not a chance encounter, that this was something planned, orchestrated, inevitable. The man raised his hand, revealing the object he held. It was a small, silver vial, filled with a shimmering, iridescent liquid. This, the man said, his voice a low, menacing hiss, is your end. He uncorked the vial, and a pungent odor filled the air, a scent that made Avant's head spin, her stomach churn, her senses overload. She felt a wave of dizziness, of nausea, of weakness. Silas reacted instantly, pushing Evan behind him, shielding her from the unknown threat. He let out a roar, a primal sound that shook the very ground beneath their feet, and lunged at the hunter, his body transforming, shifting, becoming a wolf. The hunter, unfazed by Silas's transformation, smiled, a cruel, sinister expression that revealed his confidence. He tossed the vial towards Evan, the liquid splashing onto her skin, burning like acid, searing her flesh, consuming her with the darkness. Evan screamed. It was a sound that sliced the air in two, a sound that could curdle blood, a sound that would haunt her nightmares. Chapter 13. The Price of Freedom. The scream echoed through the forest, a raw, primal cry of pain and terror that ripped through the stillness of the night, scattering the creatures of the darkness, silencing the whispers of the wind. The liquid, a concoction brewed from ancient lore and dark magic, burned like liquid fire, searing Evan's skin, eating away at her flesh, attacking her very essence, her moonbound power. Silas, in his wolf form, a magnificent creature of muscle and shadow, snarled ferociously, his golden eyes blazing with rage and protectiveness. He had knocked the hunter to the ground, his powerful jaws snapping inches from the man's throat, but the damage was done. The vial had been emptied, its contents spilled upon Eventha, its dark magic taking hold. Eventha collapsed to her knees, her body racked with pain, her vision blurring, her senses overwhelmed by the burning, the nausea, the darkness that was consuming her. She clutched at her arm, where the liquid had splashed, her fingers digging into her flesh, trying to stop the spread, to fight the agonizing sensation, but it was useless. The poison, crafted specifically for Moonbound, was relentless, insidious, unstoppable. She could hear Silas growling, snarling, fighting the hunter, but the sound seemed distant, muffled, as if she were underwater, drowning in a sea of pain. She could feel her strength ebbing away, her consciousness fading, her connection to the moon, to the earth, to Silas weakening. The hunter, despite being pinned beneath Silas's powerful form, laughed, a chilling, triumphant sound that echoed through the clearing. "It is done," he gasped, his voice strained, but filled with a perverse satisfaction. "The Moonbound is no more. No more." The words echoed in Evan's fading consciousness, a death knell, a finality that chilled her to the bone. She was dying. She could feel it, the life force draining from her, the magic fading, the darkness consuming. But even in her agony, even as she teetered on the brink of oblivion, a spark of defiance, of anger, of love, flickered within her. She would not surrender. She would not let the darkness win. She would not abandon Silas. With a surge of will, fueled by her love for him, by her newfound connection to the moon, to the earth, to her moonbound heritage, she focused her remaining strength, her fading magic, on the one thing that still connected her to life, to hope the silver mark on her palm. The mark, which had always been a source of mystery, of fear, of destiny, now pulsed with a faint but persistent light, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. She concentrated on the feeling, on the warmth, on the connection, drawing upon the ancient power that flowed through her veins, the legacy of her ancestors, the gift of the moon goddess Selene. She whispered a word, an ancient incantation she didn't know she knew, a word that came to her instinctively, a plea, a prayer, a command. The word resonated through the clearing, vibrating with power, with magic, with hope. The effect was immediate. The burning sensation began to subside, the nausea receded, the darkness retreated. Eventha gasped, taking a deep, shuddering breath, her lungs filling with the cool night air, her senses slowly returning. Silas, sensing the shift, the change in Eventha, released the hunter, who scrambled to his feet and fled into the darkness, his mission accomplished, his victory Pyrrhic. Silas, still in his wolf form, rushed to Evan's side, nuzzling her gently, his golden eyes filled with concern, with relief, with love. He licked her wounds, his rough tongue soothing the burning skin, his saliva, imbued with the healing properties of the wolf, accelerating the recovery. Eventha, weak but alive, reached out and touched Silas's fur, her fingers tracing the contours of his powerful muscles, feeling the warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. She looked into his eyes, into the golden depths that held a universe of unspoken emotions. And she saw gratitude, relief, and a burning love. I'm all right," she whispered, her voice hoarse, but firm. It didn't work. I'm still here. Still here." The words, simple yet profound, echoed through the clearing, a testament to her resilience, to her strength, to her moonbound power. But the encounter had taken its toll. The poison, though neutralized, had weakened her, drained her, leaving her vulnerable, exposed. And the hunter, he had escaped. He would report back, to his masters, to the Argentum, to those who sought to destroy the Moonbound, to eradicate the wolves. They had won a temporary reprieve, a small victory in a larger, more dangerous war. Freedom, Evan realized, came with a price that must be paid in vigilance or pain. Silas shifted back, his human form replacing the wolf. He kneeled and examined the angry wounds. He then looked deep into her eyes. "We must go, and quickly." Chapter 14. Shattered Reflections. Silas's urgent words, laced with a palpable sense of danger, snapped Evan out of her lingering daze. The pain, though diminished, still throbbed through her arm, a constant reminder of the hunter's attack, of the vulnerability of her newfound power, of the precariousness of their situation. He helped her to her feet, his strong arms supporting her weight, his touch gentle and reassuring. She leaned against him, drawing strength from his presence, from his warmth, from his love. She looked at his face, at his handsome features etched with concern, at his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight, and saw a reflection of her own fear, her own uncertainty, but also a fierce determination, a shared resolve. "Where were we going?" she asked, her voice still hoarse, her body trembling slightly from the aftereffects of the poison. "Somewhere safe," Silas replied, his voice low and urgent, his gaze scanning the surrounding forest, his senses on high alert. "Somewhere they won't find us. Somewhere we can regroup." He didn't elaborate, didn't specify their destination, but Evan trusted him implicitly. She knew that he would protect her, that he would do everything in his power to keep her safe. She had seen the ferocity of his wolf form, the unwavering loyalty of his heart, the depth of his love. They began to walk, Silas leading the way, his hand firmly clasped in hers, their bodies close, their steps in sync. The forest, which had once seemed inviting, magical, now felt menacing, threatening, filled with hidden dangers, with unseen eyes watching them. Evan focused on Silas, on his strength, on his guidance, on his presence, drawing comfort from his nearness, from his unwavering resolve. She tried to ignore the pain, the fear, the uncertainty, focusing instead on the task at hand, on surviving, on escaping. As they walked, Silas spoke, his voice low and soothing, explaining their situation, their options, their challenges. He told her that the Argentum, the society of hunters who had attacked them, were relentless, resourceful, and possessed ancient knowledge, weapons, and rituals designed to target werewolves and Moonbound alike. He told her that they were now fugitives, hunted by both the Argentum and, potentially, by members of his own pack who disapproved of his bond with her, who saw her as a threat, a liability, a human. He told her that they needed to find a safe haven, a place where they could regroup, plan their next move, and prepare for the inevitable confrontation. He told her that they needed to find allies, others who understood the ancient ways, who supported the Moonbound, who could help them fight the darkness that threatened to consume them all. His words, though sobering, did not deter Evan. She had come too far, experienced too much, embraced too much of her newfound destiny to turn back now. She had tasted the magic, felt the power, glimpsed the possibilities. She had found love. "We'll face them together," she said, her voice firm, unwavering, her gaze meeting Silas's. "We'll fight. We'll win." Silas smiled, a gentle, appreciative smile that eased some of the tension that had coiled within her. He squeezed her hand, a silent acknowledgement of their shared resolve, their unbreakable bond, their love. They continued to walk, their pace quickening, their senses heightened, their awareness focused on the surrounding forest, on the potential dangers that lurked within the shadows. They reached a clearing, a small, open space bathed in the soft, silvery moonlight. In the center of the clearing was a pool of water, still and clear, reflecting the sky above, the trees around them, the moon. Silas stopped, his gaze fixed on the pool, his expression thoughtful. "We need to rest," he said, his voice low and weary. "But first we need to see." "See what?" Evan wondered, her mind still foggy from the after-effects of the poison, her body aching from the exertion, the pain. She looked at the pool, at its still, clear surface, and saw her reflection. But it was not the reflection she expected. It was not the image of the woman she had been, the quiet, solitary widow, living a simple life. It was the reflection of someone different, someone stronger, more confident, more powerful. Her eyes, usually a soft hazel, now glowed with a faint, silvery light, reflecting the moon above. Her hair, streaked with silver, seemed to shimmer, to dance in the moonlight. Her skin, though pale and marked by the hunter's attack, radiated a subtle warmth, a nascent energy, a magic. She saw the silver mark on her palm, no longer a hidden secret, but a symbol of her heritage, her power, her destiny. She saw the scars, the wounds inflicted by the hunter, but they were fading, healing, a testament to her resilience, to her moonbound strength. She looked at Silas, standing beside her, his reflection merging with hers in the still water. She saw his handsome face, his golden eyes, his strong, protective presence. She saw their bond, their connection, their love. And in that moment, in that shattered reflection, Evan saw herself, her true self, for the first time. She saw the moonbound, the warrior, the lover. She saw her destiny. The reflection in the pool shimmered and distorted. She saw Lyra, the pack. She saw the Argentum. She saw a war of magic. Chapter 15. The Hunter's Pursuit. The vision in the pool, fleeting yet potent, shattered the fragile calm, injecting a renewed urgency into their flight. The idyllic reflection, a glimpse of their potential future, was replaced by the grim reality of their present hunted, vulnerable, and running out of time. Silas, his face etched with a mixture of concern and determination, pulled Evan away from the pool, his hand gripping hers with a possessive urgency. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice low and strained. "They'll be tracking us. The Argentum, they're relentless." Evan nodded, her heart pounding against her ribs, the lingering effects of the poison mingling with the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The vision, though brief, had reinforced the gravity of their situation, the relentless pursuit of their enemies, the inevitability of conflict. They plunged back into the dense forest, their pace quickening, their senses on high alert. Silas led the way, his wolf-enhanced senses guiding them through the treacherous terrain, his body a shield, his presence a constant reassurance. Evan followed close behind, her own senses, though still nascent, growing stronger with each passing moment, attuned to the whispers of the wind, the rustling of leaves, the subtle sense of the forest. She could feel the Argentum's presence, a cold, menacing shadow that followed them, relentless, unwavering. She could sense their determination, their hatred, their bloodlust. They were not just hunting werewolves, they were hunting her. "How are they tracking us?" she asked, her voice breathless, her words barely audible above the pounding of her heart. Silas glanced back at her, his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight, his expression grim. "They have methods," he said, his voice evasive, unwilling to reveal the full extent of their enemy's capabilities. "Ancient rituals, tracking spells, trained hounds." Hounds. The word sent a shiver down Evan's spine, conjuring images of savage beasts, their fangs bared, their eyes glowing with predatory hunger, their noses trained on her scent, on her blood. She stumbled, her foot catching on a root, her body jarring with pain. Silas caught her instantly, his strong arms preventing her from falling, his touch gentle and reassuring. "We need to move faster," he said, his voice urgent, but laced with concern. "We need to reach Sanctuary." Sanctuary. The word, a beacon of hope in the darkness, a promise of safety, of refuge, of respite. But where was this sanctuary? And how could they possibly reach it, with the Argentum relentless on their heels? As if in answer to her unspoken question, Silas veered off the path, leading her deeper into the forest, towards a dense thicket of trees, their branches intertwined, their leaves forming a thick, impenetrable canopy. "There's a hidden place," he said, his voice low and confidential, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "A place known only to a few. A place where the veil between worlds is thin." a place where the veil between worlds is thin. The words, mystical and intriguing, sent a shiver of both excitement and apprehension through Evan. She remembered Silas's earlier words about the Moonbound's connection to the spirit world, about their ability to shift, to traverse the boundaries between realities. They reached the thicket, and Silas pushed aside the branches, revealing a narrow opening, a hidden passage that led into the darkness. He gestured for Evan to enter, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, a gesture of guidance, of protection, of possession. Evan hesitated, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. She looked into the darkness, into the unknown, and felt a pull, a calling, a sense of destiny. She took a deep breath, the cold night air filling her lungs, grounding her, calming her. She looked at Silas, at his waiting eyes, at his silent encouragement, at his love. And she stepped into the darkness. The passage was narrow and winding, the air thick with the scent of damp earth, of decaying leaves, of something else, something magical, something ancient. Evan could feel the energy shifting around her, the veil between worlds thinning, the boundaries between realities blurring. She felt a tingling sensation in her skin, a warmth spreading through her body, a connection to the earth, to the moon, to Silas. She felt her senses sharpening, her awareness expanding, her power growing. They emerged from the passage into a small clearing, bathed in an ethereal, otherworldly light. The air was still and quiet, the silence broken only by the gentle murmur of a nearby stream. In the center of the clearing stood a circle of ancient stones, their surfaces covered in strange symbols, their presence radiating a palpable energy, a magic. This was it. Sanctuary. Evan stumbled into the clearing, a strangled cry of surprise and fear escaping her throat. Within the circle, cloaked figures were chanting. It was a trap. Chapter 16. Beneath the surface. The chanting, a low, rhythmic drone that vibrated through the clearing, sent a wave of fear and confusion washing over Evan. The cloaked figures, their faces hidden in shadow, their movements synchronized, their voices blending into a single, unsettling harmony, were a terrifying sight, a stark contrast to the serene beauty of the hidden sanctuary. Silas, his body tensing, his golden eyes narrowing, stepped in front of Evan, shielding her with his presence, his hand reaching for the hilt of a hidden blade beneath his cloak. He recognized the chanting, the symbols on the stones, the energy that permeated the clearing. It was a ritual, an ancient rite, but not one of protection, not one of sanctuary. It was something darker. Argentum, he growled, his voice low and menacing, his words confirming Avant's worst fears. The hunters had found them, had anticipated their arrival, had set a trap, a carefully orchestrated ambush. But something was off. The chanting, though familiar, was distorted, the rhythm uneven, the energy fractured. The figures, though cloaked in the traditional garb of the Argentum, moved with a hesitancy, a lack of the usual precision, the fanaticism. Before Silas could react, before he could unleash his fury, his wolf, upon the hunters, a voice, clear and strong, cut through the chanting, silencing the figures, breaking the ritual.
Stop.
The figures froze, their movements ceasing, their heads turning towards the source of the command. From the shadows of the ancient stones, a woman emerged, her form tall and imposing, her face hidden by the hood of her cloak, but her voice familiar. It was a voice Evan had heard before, a voice that had haunted her dreams, a voice that had spoken to her in the whispers of the wind, in the rustling of leaves, in the silence of the night. The woman lowered her hood, revealing her face, her features bathed in the ethereal light of the clearing. It was Alara, Avant's mother. Evan gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief, her heart pounding against her ribs, her mind struggling to comprehend the impossible. Her mother, dead for 20 years, stood before her alive, vibrant, her eyes filled with a mixture of love, concern, and determination.
Mother?
Evan whispered, her voice trembling, her words barely audible, her legs threatening to give way beneath her. Alara smiled, a gentle, reassuring smile that eased some of the shock, the disbelief, the terror that gripped Evan. "It's all right, Evan," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You're safe. You're home. Home." The word, spoken with such warmth, such tenderness, resonated deep within Evan, stirring a longing, a yearning for a connection, a belonging she had thought lost forever. But how? How was this possible? Her mother was dead. She had seen her die, had mourned her loss, had lived with the emptiness, the grief, for 20 years. Before Evan could voice her questions, her disbelief, her joy, Silas stepped forward, his expression a mixture of confusion, suspicion, and hope. "Alara?" he said, his voice questioning, his golden eyes searching her face, seeking confirmation, seeking truth. How is this possible?" Alara turned to Silas, her gaze softening, her expression acknowledging his presence, his loyalty, his love for her daughter. "It's a long story, Silas," she said, her voice tinged with a hint of sadness, a hint of regret. "A story of secrets, of sacrifices, of survival." She explained that she had not died, that her death had been a deception, a carefully orchestrated plan to protect Evan from the Argentum, from the dangers of her moonbound heritage. She had faked her death, with the help of a few trusted allies, and had gone into hiding, watching over Evan from afar, waiting for the right moment, for the blood moon, for the awakening. She explained that the figures in the clearing were not Argentum hunters, but members of a secret order, the Luna's Guard, protectors of the moonbound, descendants of the ancient priestesses who had served the moon goddess Selene. They had been expecting Evan and Silas, had been preparing for their arrival, had been waiting to help. The chanting, she explained, was not an Argentum ritual, but a cleansing ceremony, a way to remove the remnants of the hunter's poison, to restore Avant's strength, to heal her wounds. As Alara spoke, Evan listened, her mind reeling, her heart pounding, her emotions a whirlwind of confusion, disbelief, joy, and relief. The world she thought she knew, the reality she had accepted, was shattering around her, revealing a hidden truth, a deeper connection, a destiny she had never imagined. She had found her place. She was starting to understand. Beneath the surface, a whole different world. Chapter 17. The Unveiling. The revelation of Alara's survival, her explanation of the Luna's Guard, the cleansing ceremony, washed over Evan in a tidal wave of relief and bewilderment. The impossible had become real, the dead had returned, and the world she thought she knew had been turned upside down, revealing a hidden layer of magic, of ancient secrets, of hope. Alara approached Evan, her steps graceful and measured, her eyes filled with a mother's love, a warrior's strength, a moonbound's power. She reached out and gently touched Avant's cheek, her fingers tracing the contours of her face, her touch sending a wave of warmth, of familiarity, of connection, through her. "I'm so sorry, Evan," Alara said, her voice soft, but firm, her words laced with a deep regret. "I had to protect you. I had to hide you. From the Argentum. From your destiny." Destiny. The word, once a source of fear, of uncertainty, now resonated with a newfound meaning, a sense of purpose, of belonging, of inevitability. Evan looked at her mother, at her strong, beautiful face, at her eyes that reflected the moonlight, and saw a reflection of herself, of her potential, of her future. I don't understand," Evan said, her voice still trembling slightly, her mind struggling to grasp the enormity of the situation. How did you survive? How did you hide?" Alara smiled, a gentle, knowing smile that eased some of Avant's confusion, her disbelief. "It was difficult," she admitted, her expression turning grave. "But I had help. From the Luna's Guard. From others. Others." The word, vague yet intriguing, hinted at a network of allies, of protectors, of secrets, that extended far beyond the hidden clearing, beyond the boundaries of Havenwood, beyond the veil between worlds. Alara explained that the Luna's Guard was an ancient order dating back to the time of the first Moonbound, dedicated to protecting their lineage, to preserving their knowledge, to fighting the darkness that threatened to consume them all. They were a secret society, operating in the shadows, their existence known only to a few, their members bound by a sacred oath, by a shared destiny, by a common purpose. She explained that they had been watching over Evan, protecting her from afar, guiding her path, preparing her for the awakening. They had known about Silas, about the blood moon, about the bond that would form between them. They had anticipated the Argentum's attack, had prepared the cleansing ceremony, had waited for their arrival. But why didn't you tell me? Evan asked, her voice filled with a mixture of confusion and hurt. Why did you let me believe that you were dead? Alara's expression softened, her eyes filling with a mother's remorse, a warrior's sacrifice. It was the only way, Evan, she said, her voice low and earnest. The Argentum, they are relentless. They would have stopped at nothing to find you, to exploit your power, to destroy you. I had to make them believe that you were no longer a threat, that you were ordinary.
Ordinary.
The word, spoken with such emphasis, such pain, revealed the depth of Alara's sacrifice, the burden she had carried, the love she had for her daughter. She had given up her own life, her own identity, her own happiness, to protect Evan, to give her a chance at a normal life, a life free from the dangers of her moonbound heritage. But the blood moon had changed everything. It had awakened Avant's power, her connection to the ancient ways, her destiny. It had made her a target, a threat, a key. You are not ordinary, Evan, Alara said, her voice firm, unwavering, her gaze meeting hers. You are moonbound. You are powerful. You are important. You are the one who can heal the rift, restore the balance, break the curse. The words, the same words Silas had spoken, echoed in Avant's mind, reinforcing the magnitude of her task, the weight of her responsibility, the inevitability of her fate. She was no longer just Evan the Corbin, the solitary widow, the grieving daughter. She was moonbound, a warrior, a leader. Alara gestured towards the circle of ancient stones, towards the cloaked figures of the Luna's Guard, who stood silently watching, their faces hidden in shadow, their presence radiating a palpable energy, a magic. They will help you, Alara said. They will teach you. They will guide you. You are not alone, Evan. You have us.
Us.
The word, a promise of support, of loyalty, of belonging, filled Evan with a newfound hope, a nascent strength, a determination. She was no longer alone. She had her mother. She had Silas. She had the Luna's Guard. She had a family. The cloaked figures stepped forward, their movements synchronized, their voices blending into a single, harmonious chant. They began the cleansing ceremony, their hands moving in intricate patterns, their voices weaving a tapestry of ancient words, of forgotten magic, of healing power. Evan felt a warmth spreading through her body, a tingling sensation in her skin, a connection to the earth, to the moon, to the energy of the clearing. The pain in her arms subsided, her vision cleared, her strength returned. She looked at her mother, at Silas, at the Luna's Guard, and saw her future. A future filled with challenges, with dangers, with possibilities. A future where she would embrace her destiny, her power, her love. A future was being unveiled. A smile, a genuine expression of trust, of acceptance, of hope, touched Avant's lips. Chapter 18. A Choice of Destinies. The cleansing ceremony concluded, the chanting fading into a gentle hum that resonated through the clearing, leaving a palpable sense of peace, of renewal, of power. Evan felt rejuvenated, her body cleansed of the hunter's poison, her spirit strengthened, her connection to the moon, to the earth, to her moonbound heritage, solidified. Alara approached her, her eyes filled with a mother's pride, a warrior's respect, a moonbound's understanding. She placed a hand on Avant's shoulder, her touch firm and reassuring, a silent acknowledgement of their shared destiny, their unbreakable bond, their love. "You are ready, Evan," Alara said, her voice soft but firm, her words carrying the weight of centuries, of ancient prophecies, of inevitable choices. "Ready to embrace your power, to face your enemies, to fulfill your destiny."
Destiny.
The word, no longer a burden, a threat, a mystery, now felt like a calling, a purpose, a path. Evanna looked at her mother, at Silas, who stood beside her, his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight, his presence a constant reassurance, a grounding force, a love, and felt a surge of determination, of courage, of acceptance. "What must I do?" she asked, her voice clear and strong, her gaze unwavering, her heart filled with a newfound resolve. Alara smiled, a gentle, knowing smile that eased some of Avant's lingering apprehension, her unspoken fears. "The Book of Selene," she said, her voice low and confidential, her eyes flickering towards the ancient text that Evan still clutched in her hands. "It holds the answers. It holds the key." The key. The word, a metaphor for knowledge, for understanding, for power, resonated deep within Evanna. She remembered Silas's words, his guidance, his insistence that she study the ancient text, that she learn its secrets, that she embrace its wisdom. "But the book it's written in an ancient language," Evanna said, her voice hesitant, questioning. I don't understand it." Alara nodded, her expression acknowledging the challenge, the difficulty, the necessity. "The Luna's Guard will help you," she said. "They will translate the text, interpret the symbols, reveal the secrets. They will teach you the ancient ways, the rituals, the magic." Magic. The word, once a source of wonder, of fear, of disbelief, now felt like a natural extension of herself, a part of her identity, a tool, a weapon. Evanna looked at the cloaked figures of the Luna's Guard, their faces still hidden in shadow, their presence radiating a palpable energy, a power, and felt a surge of gratitude, of respect, of belonging. But there was more. Something unspoken.
A choice.
A decision that Evanna alone could make. Alara looked at Silas, her gaze lingering on his strong, handsome face, on his golden eyes that reflected both a wildness and a tenderness, on his love for her daughter. She turned back to Evanna, her expression serious. "There is another path, Evanna," Alara said, her voice low and earnest, her words carrying the weight of a difficult truth, a painful choice. "A path that leads away from the Moonbound, away from the wolves, away from the dangers. A path that leads back to your old life."
Her old life.
The words, once a source of comfort, of familiarity, of security, now felt like a prison, a cage, a limitation. Evanna remembered her quiet, solitary existence in Havenwood, her empty cottage, her loneliness. She remembered the fear, the uncertainty, the incompleteness that had haunted her for so long. She looked at Silas, at his waiting eyes, at his silent plea, at his love, and felt a pang of conflict. She could choose to return to her old life, to escape the dangers, the challenges, the responsibilities of her moonbound heritage. She could choose to deny her destiny, but she also knew that she could never truly go back. She had tasted the magic, felt the power, glimpsed the possibilities. She had found love. She had found herself. Evan began, her voice trembling slightly, her heart torn between two worlds, between two destinies, between two loves. She looked at her mother, at Silas, at the Luna's Guard, at the circle of ancient stones, at the moonlit clearing, and felt the weight of her decision, the consequences of her choice. She took a deep breath, the cold night air filling her lungs, grounding her, calming her. She looked into Silas's eyes, into the golden depths that held a universe of unspoken emotions, and saw her answer. "I choose this," she said, her voice firm, unwavering, her gaze locked on Silas's. "I choose the Moonbound. I choose the wolves. I choose you." Her words, a declaration of love, of loyalty, of destiny, echoed through the clearing, sealing her fate, embracing her future, accepting her power. Silas's face reflected surprise, then relief, then elation. Silas stepped forward, taking her hand in his fingers intertwining with hers, a gesture of unity, of connection, of love. He leaned down and kissed her, a gentle, tender kiss that sealed their bond, their commitment, their destiny. It was a choice of destinies. And she had chosen. Chapter 19. The Reckoning. The kiss, a seal of their intertwined destinies, resonated through the clearing, a silent affirmation of their love, their loyalty, their defiance. The air crackled with energy, with the combined power of the Moonbound, the wolves, the Luna's guard, a force united against the encroaching darkness, against the relentless pursuit of the Argentum, against the ancient curse. Alara smiled, a knowing, approving smile that acknowledged Evan's choice, her courage, her strength. She stepped back, allowing Evana and Silas to stand together, their hands clasped, their eyes locked, their hearts united. Then let us begin, Alara said, her voice firm and resolute, her words carrying the weight of centuries, of ancient prophecies, of impending battles. The time has come to prepare.
Prepare.
The word, a call to action, a summons to arms, a promise of conflict, echoed through the clearing, stirring the cloaked figures of the Luna's guard, their faces still hidden in shadow, their presence radiating a palpable energy, a readiness. They began to move, their movements synchronized, their voices blending into a low, rhythmic chant, a preparation ritual, an invocation of ancient powers, a summoning of strength. The circle of ancient stones glowed with an ethereal light, the symbols on their surfaces shimmering, pulsing, radiating a magic. Evana felt a surge of energy, a tingling sensation in her skin, a connection to the earth, to the moon, to the power of the clearing. She looked at Silas, at his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight, at his strong, handsome face etched with determination, at his love, and felt a surge of confidence, of courage, of readiness. She was no longer afraid. She was no longer uncertain. She was moonbound, a warrior, a lover, a leader. Alara approached Evana, placing a hand on her shoulder, her touch firm and reassuring, a silent transmission of knowledge, of wisdom, of power. The Book of Selene, Alara said, her voice low and confidential, her eyes flickering towards the ancient text that Evana still clutched in her hands. It contains the key to breaking the curse, but it also reveals the dangers, the sacrifices, the price. The word, a reminder of the cost of freedom, of the burden of power, of the inevitability of loss, sent a shiver down Evan's spine. She knew that the path ahead would not be easy, that there would be challenges, obstacles, sacrifices. She knew that she might lose everything. But she also knew that she was not alone. She had Silas. She had her mother. She had the Luna's guard. She had a family. And she had a purpose. What is the price? Evana asked, her voice clear and strong, her gaze unwavering, her heart filled with a nascent resolve. Alara hesitated, her expression grave. The curse it is bound to Lyra's lineage, she said, her voice low and heavy, her words carrying the weight of a painful truth, a tragic history. To break the curse, you must confront her. You must defeat her. Lyra, the name, once a source of sympathy, of understanding, of shared pain, now resonated with a newfound threat, a looming conflict, a personal reckoning. Evana remembered Lyra's hostility, her resentment, her love for Silas. She remembered her words, sharp and cold as shards of ice, her betrayal. She knew that Lyra was not just an enemy, a rival, a threat. She was a victim, a casualty of the curse, a pawn in a larger game. She was also connected to Silas. There must be another way, Evana said, her voice pleading, her heart aching for a solution, a resolution that did not involve violence, bloodshed, loss. Alara shook her head, her expression sad. The curse it is fueled by hatred, by jealousy, by darkness, she said. It can only be broken by love, by compassion, by light. But to unleash that light, you must face the darkness. You must confront the source. Confront the source. The words, a call to action, a summons to battle, a promise of pain, echoed in Yvan's mind. She looked at Silas, at his golden eyes that reflected both a wildness and a tenderness, at his strong, handsome face etched with a mixture of determination and regret. He knew. He had always known. The path to freedom, to breaking the curse, led through Lyra, through his past, through his former love. The chanting intensified, the circle of stones glowing brighter, the air crackling with energy, the reckoning approaching. The final confrontation was near. It was time. Chapter 20. The final confrontation of hearts. The air thrummed with power, the chanting of the Luna's guard reaching a crescendo, the circle of ancient stones radiating an almost blinding light. The hidden clearing, once a sanctuary, a refuge, had transformed into an arena, a stage set for the final act, the reckoning. Yvan stood between Silas and Alara, her hand clasped tightly in Silas's, her other hand resting on the cool leather of the Book of Selene. She felt the combined strength of their presence, the unwavering support of the Luna's guard, the weight of her destiny. She was ready. Alara stepped forward, her voice clear and strong, resonating through the clearing, silencing the chanting, focusing the energy, directing the power. The time has come, she announced, her words carrying the weight of centuries, of ancient prophecies, of inevitable conflict. The Argentum are close. Lyra is with them. Lyra. The name, spoken with a mixture of sadness and determination, hung in the air, a reminder of the personal cost of this battle, of the tangled web of love, loyalty, and betrayal. Yvan looked at Silas, his face a mask of conflicting emotions, his golden eyes reflecting the turmoil within, the pain of confronting his past, his former love, his responsibility. "I'm sorry, Yvan," he said, his voice low and strained, his words a confession, an apology, a plea. "This is my fault. My past has come back to haunt us." Yvan squeezed his hand, her touch firm and reassuring, her gaze unwavering, her heart filled with compassion. "It's not your fault, Silas," she said, her voice soft, but firm. "It's the curse. It's Lyra's choice. We will face her together. Together." The word, a promise of unity, of strength, of love, echoed in the clearing, a defiance against the encroaching darkness, a beacon of hope in the face of despair. The ground began to tremble, a low rumble that vibrated through their bodies, a sign of the approaching conflict, of the Argentum's arrival. The trees surrounding the clearing rustled violently, their branches thrashing, their leaves scattering, as if buffeted by an unseen wind. From the shadows, figures emerged, their forms slowly taking shape as they stepped into the ethereal light of the clearing. They were hunters, clad in dark armor, their faces grim, their eyes burning with a cold, fanatic zeal, their weapons glinting in the moonlight. And at their head stood Lyra. She was magnificent and terrifying, her wolf form sleek and powerful, her fur the color of midnight, her eyes glowing with a fierce, predatory light. But it was not the light of the moon, of the ancient ways of the bond. It was a corrupted light, a twisted reflection of her former self, fueled by hatred, by jealousy, by the curse. She looked at Silas, her gaze lingering on his face, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain, anger, and longing. Then, her gaze shifted to Yvan, her eyes narrowing, her expression hardening, her hatred palpable. "You," Lyra snarled, her voice a guttural growl that resonated through the clearing. "You have stolen him from me. You have defiled the ancient ways. You will pay."
Pay.
The word, a threat, a promise of vengeance, a declaration of war, hung in the air, heavy with the weight of impending conflict, of inevitable loss. Yvan stepped forward, meeting Lyra's gaze, her own eyes reflecting the moonlight, her heart filled with a mixture of fear, determination, and compassion. "I have not stolen anything, Lyra," Yvan said, her voice clear and strong, her words ringing with truth, with sincerity, with understanding. Silas, he chose me, just as he once chose you. Love, it cannot be stolen. It can only be given. Freely. Freely. The word, a key to understanding, a path to resolution, a hope for peace, echoed in the clearing, but it fell on deaf ears, on a heart hardened by pain, by betrayal, by the curse. Lyra let out a roar, a primal sound that shook the very ground beneath their feet, a challenge, a declaration, a rejection. She lunged at Eventha, her claws extended, her fangs bared, her intent deadly. Silas reacted instantly, pushing Eventha behind him, his own body transforming, shifting, becoming the magnificent wolf, his golden eyes blazing with protective fury, his love. The battle began. It was a clash of titans, a dance of darkness and light, a struggle between love and hate, a reckoning of hearts. Silas and Lyra fought with a ferocity born of their shared past, their broken bond, their conflicting destinies. The hunters engaged the Luna's guard, their weapons clashing, their bodies colliding, their hatred fueling their fight. Eventha, guided by Alara, opened the Book of Selene, her fingers tracing the ancient symbols, her mind focused on the task at hand, on breaking the curse. She found the passage, the incantation, the key. It was a ritual of sacrifice, of love, of forgiveness. It required a pure heart, a selfless act, a willingness to let go. Eventha knew what she had to do. She stepped forward, into the heart of the battle, her voice rising above the din of conflict, her words clear and strong, her intention unwavering. Lyra, she cried, her voice echoing through the clearing, reaching the battling wolves, the fighting figures, the heart of the storm. Stop. This is not the way. The curse, it can be broken, but not with hatred, not with violence, not with revenge. Lyra, momentarily distracted by Avant's words, paused in her attack on Silas, her golden eyes, now corrupted by darkness, flickering with a mixture of confusion, rage, and pain. You know nothing. Lyra snarled. You cannot understand. The pain, the betrayal, the loss. I do understand, Lyra, Eventha said, her voice soft, but firm, her eyes filled with compassion, with empathy, with love. I have known loss. I have known pain. I have known heartbreak. But I also know forgiveness. I know healing. I know love. She held out her hand, a gesture of peace, of reconciliation, of hope. Let go, Lyra, she pleaded. Let go of the hatred. Let go of the pain. Let go of the curse. Choose love. Choose love. The words, a final plea, a ultimate choice, a path to redemption, hung in the air, heavy with the weight of destiny, of free will, of the power of the human heart. Lyra hesitated, her body trembling, her eyes flickering between Eventha and Silas, her conflict visible. The curse, it was a part of her, a darkness that had consumed her, a prison of her own making. But in that moment, in that hesitation, Eventha saw a flicker of her former self, a glimpse of the wolf she had been, the love she had known. And then, with a heart-wrenching cry, a sound of anguish, of release, of surrender, Lyra made her choice. She bowed her head. The darkness receded from her eyes. She turned her back and walked away. Epilogue. The clearing fell silent, the sounds of battle replaced by the gentle murmur of the stream, the rustling of leaves, the whispers of peace. Lyra's retreat, a solitary figure disappearing into the shadows, marked the end of the conflict, the breaking of the curse, the triumph of love. The hunters, demoralized by their leader's departure, their fanatic zeal extinguished, surrendered, their weapons falling to the ground, their bodies slumping in defeat. The Luna's guard, their mission accomplished, their duty fulfilled, stood silently watching, their faces, now visible, reflecting a mixture of relief, gratitude, and respect. Silas, his wolf form slowly receding, his human features returning, approached Eventha, his golden eyes filled with a profound love, a deep gratitude, a boundless admiration. He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, his touch gentle and reassuring, his love a tangible force. "You did it, Evan," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion, his words a testament to her courage, her compassion, her strength. "You broke the curse. You saved us all." Evan smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that radiated joy, relief, and love. She looked at Silas, at his handsome face etched with a mixture of exhaustion and happiness, at his golden eyes reflecting the dawning sun, and felt a surge of completeness. She had found her destiny, her purpose, her love. She had embraced her power, faced her fears, overcome her doubts. She was no longer just Evan the Corbin, the solitary widow, the grieving daughter, the ordinary woman. She was moonbound, a warrior, a lover, a leader, a healer. Alara approached them, her eyes filled with a mother's pride, a warrior's respect, a moonbound's understanding. She embraced Evan, her touch warm and comforting, her love a constant presence. "You have done well, my daughter," Alara said, her voice soft but firm, her words a blessing, an acknowledgement, a farewell. "You have fulfilled your destiny. You have honored your ancestors. You are free."
Free.
The word, a culmination of their journey, a reward for their struggles, a promise of a new beginning, echoed through the clearing, a symphony of hope, of peace, of love. The sun rose, casting its golden rays upon the clearing, illuminating the ancient stones, the flowing stream, the faces of those who had fought, who had loved, who had survived. The darkness had receded, the curse had been broken, the future was bright. Evan and Silas, hand in hand, walked towards the rising sun, their silhouettes merging into one, their destinies intertwined, their love eternal. They left the hidden clearing, leaving behind the shadows of the past, embracing the light of the future, their hearts filled with hope, with peace, with love. They went to rebuild the pack, to reunite with those who remained loyal, and to forge a new future free of